I still remember that trip to Miami with my best friend Jessica, as if it happened yesterday. At the time, I was only a few years into teaching foreign languages, working hard but quietly yearning for something more than the routine of lesson plans and classrooms. Jessica had convinced me that a little sun and salt water would do me good. She was right. Miami greeted us with warm breezes, the endless sound of waves, and music spilling from every bar along Ocean Drive. It felt like stepping into a dream, a world where anything could begin. One night, we joined a crowd gathered on the beach for a cultural festival. Music filled the humid air. Drums, guitars, voices singing in languages I only half understood but felt deep in my bones. People danced barefoot in the sand, laughter echoing against the tide. Jessica grabbed my hand and pulled me into the throng. I laughed, hesitant at first, then let myself move with the rhythm. That was when I noticed him, Nathan Harris. Our eyes met across the circle of dancers. It was one of those impossible moments when the noise of the world seems to fade and you're left with a single pair of eyes locked on yours. He pushed through the crowd, smiling, and introduced himself with the kind of confidence that made it seem as though he had known me forever. There was no awkward pause, no small talk we had to force. We simply clicked. From that night on, we were inseparable. We explored Miami together, late-night walks along the shore, sitting on the pier with street food in our hands, talking about our dreams as if the future were already ours to design. Nathan told me about his work in business, about the way he specialized in turning failing companies around. He spoke with such drive, such clarity, that I believed he could do anything. And he looked at me as if I was just as capable, as if he saw a partner rather than just a pretty face on vacation. When the trip ended, I expected our story to fade the way holiday romances usually do. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As we said our goodbyes at the airport, we discovered we lived not just in the same state, but in the very same city, Seattle. I remember laughing in disbelief, Jessica teasing me that destiny was practically shouting in my ear. And maybe it was. Back home, Nathan and I picked up exactly where we had left off. We went on real dates, coffee shops on rainy mornings, dinners in tucked-away restaurants where we lingered long after the plates were cleared. Everything felt effortless, as if we had known each other for years instead of weeks. There were no games, no doubts. He would call me late at night just to hear my voice, and I found myself smiling into the darkness, certain that this was love. It didn't take long for Nathan to propose. Looking back, it seems reckless how quickly we rushed into marriage. But at the time, it felt right. More than right, it felt inevitable. People talk about soulmates as if they're rare, fragile things, but with Nathan, I felt like I had found mine. We didn't need time to test or question it. We believed in what we felt. And so, within months of returning from Miami, I was standing in front of him, saying, "I do," convinced I had just stepped into the life I was always meant to have. When Nathan and I returned to Seattle as husband and wife, we were determined to build a life together from the ground up. The very first step was buying a place of our own. It wasn't easy. The apartment we chose was beautiful, modern, with tall windows that looked out over the city. But it came with a mortgage that seemed enormous compared to our combined salaries. Still, Nathan was confident. He had already made a name for himself as a crisis manager, the kind of man companies called when everything was falling apart. His income was high, his reputation growing, and he believed we could handle the weight of the loan. I was still teaching languages at a private school. My paycheck was modest compared to his, but it mattered to me to contribute. I cut corners where I could, cooked at home, skipped little indulgences, and reminded myself that it was temporary, that soon we'd be free of debt and able to live the way we dreamed. There was something comforting about the rhythm of it. Nathan handing most of his paycheck straight into the mortgage, me covering groceries and utilities. We were a team, and every sacrifice felt shared. Those first years were filled with small, tender joys. Evenings spent on the couch with books in our laps, Nathan occasionally glancing over just to smile at me. Rainy weekends baking in the kitchen together, the smell of cinnamon filling the apartment, late-night conversations about the future, where we spoke in soft voices about having a child, about hearing little feet running across the hardwood floors. Sometimes he would pull me close and whisper that one day we'd have everything: freedom, security, a family. And I believed him. When we finally made the last payment, we threw a housewarming party that doubled as a celebration of victory. Friends crowded our new apartment, filling every corner with laughter and the clink of glasses. Jessica teased me about finally being a grown-up homeowner, while Nathan played host, moving through the rooms with confidence, making everyone feel welcome. Music played, someone started silly games, and I remember how happy I felt, surrounded by people who wished us well. It was one of those nights that seemed to confirm we had done everything right. I drank more than I usually did that evening, carried away by the excitement. At some point, Nathan handed me a small stack of papers, saying they were just forms the building management needed signed. Something about utilities, future repairs, insurance. I laughed, tipsy and carefree, and signed them without reading. I vaguely remember he introduced a man wearing a suit. He said he was a notary from the building office. It felt routine, and with champagne in my hand and laughter all around, I didn't question it. I trusted Nathan completely. Jessica joked that I was signing away my life, and we all laughed. The moment slipped by in the haze of champagne, just another blur in a night of celebration. As the last of our friends left, and we collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and still glowing with joy, I remember looking around the apartment and feeling nothing but pride. We had done it together. This was our place, our future, the foundation for everything we would build. I leaned against Nathan's shoulder, believing wholeheartedly in the promise of our marriage. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there was the faintest trace of unease, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. I brushed it off then. After all, what could possibly go wrong when love and trust felt this strong? At first, life in our new apartment felt steady and secure. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm began to change. Nathan's work as a crisis manager became more demanding. He traveled constantly, sometimes gone for days at a time. Even when he was home, he often returned late, his shoulders tense, his phone buzzing with endless messages. I told myself it was the cost of his success, that he was doing it for us, for the future we had dreamed about. I never questioned him. I trusted him completely. What I didn't know then was that his late nights weren't always filled with meetings and reports. Somewhere along the way, Nathan had reconnected with Rebecca Moore, a girl who had once been the untouchable queen of his high school. She was beautiful in a polished, dramatic way, every strand of hair in place, every smile practiced to perfection. She thrived on attention, and Nathan gave it to her freely. What started as an innocent reunion grew into something more, something that pulled him further and further from our home. I remained oblivious. While he slipped away into Rebecca's orbit, I buried myself in work and self-improvement. Teaching languages was my passion, but I wanted more than just grammar exercises and lesson plans. I began studying Italian, Spanish, and even Greek, driven by the idea that one day Nathan and I would finally take the trips we had promised ourselves. I imagined us walking the narrow streets of Venice, sipping coffee in Madrid, standing beneath the blue domes of Santorini. Every late night I spent over textbooks and flashcards. I told myself I was investing in our shared future. The contrast between us couldn't have been starker. I was pouring my energy into dreams we had built together, while he was quietly dismantling the very foundation of those dreams. He grew more distant, distracted even when we sat down for dinner. His smile no longer reached his eyes, and there were moments when I caught him staring past me, lost somewhere I couldn't follow. I tried to ignore the pangs of doubt, convincing myself that every marriage had its ups and downs, that his coldness was just stress. Looking back, the signs were there: the guarded phone he never left on the counter, the trips that seemed to multiply without clear explanation, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his jacket once or twice. But I silenced the voice inside me that whispered something was wrong. I wanted so badly to believe in us, to believe that the man who had once looked at me across a crowded beach in Miami was still the same man I had married. I told myself love was stronger than distance, stronger than work, stronger than temptation. I told myself all couples go through seasons. And so I kept learning, kept working, kept waiting for the day we would be free of his obligations and able to live fully. I didn't know then that the distance between us wasn't temporary at all. It was the beginning of a fracture that could never be repaired. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind where nothing seemed out of place. I had made dinner, something simple. Roast chicken with garlic potatoes, the kind Nathan usually enjoyed. He sat across from me, unusually quiet, pushing food around his plate without appetite. I thought he was tired, worn down from another trip. But then he looked up, his eyes sharp with a strange determination. "Eleanor," he said, his voice flat, "I need to tell you something. I love someone else. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, cutting through me with a precision sharper than any knife. For a long moment, I just stared at him, unable to move, unable to breathe. Inside, everything twisted, but on the surface, I remained still. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my glass across the room like in the movies. Instead, I heard my own voice, calm and distant, asking how long it had been going on. He shifted uncomfortably, muttered something about it not mattering anymore. But it mattered to me, every detail, every lie I had swallowed whole. Yet, even as the truth sank in, I surprised myself. I didn't fight him. I didn't beg. Something inside me froze solid, a block of ice where my heart used to be. I told him quietly that I would pack my things and leave in the morning. But Nathan wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair and with a cruel smirk delivered the second blow. "You should know," he said. "You don't have any rights to the apartment. It's mine alone." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What are you talking about? We bought it together. I paid into the mortgage every single month." He chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Do you remember the housewarming party? That night you were drunk, signing all those little forms I handed you? One of them was a waiver. You gave up your share of the apartment. The deed is in my name only." The room spun. My mind scrambled back to that night. Music, laughter, champagne bubbles clouding my head. I remembered signing papers Nathan slipped in front of me. Jessica's voice joking that I was signing my life away. I had laughed. I had trusted. And now I realized I had been tricked in the cruelest way possible. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Oh, I'm very serious," he said, leaning forward. "You were never the one paying the real bills. Your salary covered groceries, utilities, pocket change compared to what I brought in. This apartment was always mine. You should be grateful you even lived here." His words sliced deeper than the betrayal itself. All those nights I had gone without, saved pennies, believed we were working together. He reduced them to nothing. To him, I was nothing. I felt hollow, like the walls of the apartment were closing in on me, spitting me out as if I never belonged. It wasn't just that he had taken another woman into his heart. It was that he had stolen the very home we had built together, the symbol of our shared struggle, our shared dreams. I didn't answer him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I stood, walked to the bedroom, and began packing a small suitcase. My hands trembled as I folded clothes, each motion mechanical, detached, as though I were watching someone else. By morning, I was gone. I left behind the furniture we had chosen together, the books we had lined up on shelves, the photos of us smiling in better days. I walked out of the apartment with nothing but a bag and the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. The cab ride to my mother's house was silent, the city lights blurring through my tears. I thought I had known pain before, but this was different. This was devastation, the kind that stripped you of home, of love, of dignity all at once. As I stepped into my mother's small house, her arms open and waiting, I realized my life as I had known it was over. and in its place, only emptiness remained. Moving back into my mother's house felt like stepping into another life. The apartment was small, modest, filled with the quiet comfort of someone who had endured her own share of losses. My mother didn't ask many questions. She simply opened the door, hugged me tight, and let me collapse into her arms. That night, as I sat at her kitchen table staring at the chipped floral mug she handed me, she said softly, "You're still young, Eleanor. This isn't the end. One day you'll be happy again." Her words were gentle, but they slid past me like water over stone. I nodded, grateful, but the pain inside me was raw and relentless. At night, I lay awake replaying every moment with Nathan. His laughter in Miami, his promises in Seattle, his betrayal at our own dinner table. I felt hollowed out, a ghost of myself. Still, I forced myself to keep moving. I went to work, prepared lessons, pretended to be fine. On the surface, I functioned. Inside, I was broken. It was Jessica who refused to let me stay buried in grief. One evening, she showed up at my mother's door, her energy as fierce as ever. "There's this event," she said, eyes sparkling. "A masquerade. Blind dates, all anonymous. Men from all over, different backgrounds, different cultures. You'll love it." I shook my head immediately. The last thing I wanted was another man, another disappointment. But Jessica pressed on, teasing, persuading, insisting that I needed to live a little, to take a chance. Then fate intervened. On the night of the event, Jessica came down with a fever so high she could barely stand. "You have to go in my place," she begged. "Everything's already arranged. Don't let my ticket go to waste." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The masquerade was held in a grand, dimly lit hall at the edge of the city. The moment I walked in, I was swallowed by the atmosphere. Music pulsing low, chandeliers casting a golden haze, masks of every color glittering under the light. People laughed, whispered, clinked glasses. Waiters drifted by with trays of champagne, and I took one, then another, letting the fizz dull the edge of my nerves. It was surreal, stepping through the crowd in costume, my own face hidden, no longer Eleanor the betrayed wife, but someone else entirely. Strangers leaned close, speaking in Spanish, Italian, Greek. I stumbled through replies, grateful for the languages I had studied, though the conversations blurred together. The room spun with sound and color, and the champagne didn't help. Then, out of nowhere, a tall man in a dark mask touched my arm, firm but not unkind, and guided me away from the noise. My head swam, my heart pounded. I didn't resist. We slipped into a smaller room, candlelit and quiet, where a woman sat behind a desk with papers spread before her. Before I could process what was happening, the man handed me a pen. I remember laughing nervously, thinking it was some kind of performance. The words on the page blurred, but I saw a faint emblem in the corner, a seal that looked like something from a foreign consulate. In my dazed state, it felt like theater, so I signed. I would later learn it was all part of an undercover legal setup approved by federal investigators. My hand shook as the pen scratched across the paper. The woman stamped the document, looked up, and said something I only half heard. "Congratulations! The marriage is official." I froze. My gaze darted to the man beside me, and for the first time I saw him clearly. His mask was gone. His eyes were dark, steady, unreadable. "Michael Demir," he said, his voice low, almost solemn. And just like that, my shattered life had taken a turn I could never have imagined. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I didn't recognize where I was. Sunlight streamed through tall windows draped with sheer curtains, casting soft gold across a room that was far too elegant to be mine. A carved wooden dresser stood against the wall, a vase of fresh lilies on top. The sheets beneath me smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. For a moment, panic tightened in my chest. Where was I? What had I done? Then I heard footsteps. The door opened, and a man from the masquerade stepped inside. His mask was gone now, revealing sharp features and calm, steady eyes. He carried a tray with coffee and toast, setting it gently on the table before looking at me with a kind of measured respect. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said. "My name is Michael Demir." I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around me. My voice cracked. "Where am I? What happened last night?" "You're safe," he reassured me quickly. "This is a private estate outside the city. And as for last night, let's just say things didn't go exactly as planned." He hesitated, then met my gaze. "The papers you signed, they were real. Legally, you and I are married." The room spun. I clutched the blanket as though it could anchor me. Married? That can't be real. It was a masquerade, some kind of game. Michael shook his head. "Not a game. A cover. I'm an undercover officer, working with federal investigators on organized financial crime. That masquerade was a sting operation." His voice was low, steady, almost too calm for the weight of his words. I stared at him, my mouth dry. "And you dragged me into it? Without telling me? Without asking?" His eyes softened. "It wasn't supposed to be you. Another woman was meant to be there, but fate had other ideas. I admit, I shouldn't have let you sign, but it worked. The cover is in place, and it gives us a connection I can't fabricate." I wanted to scream, to walk out the door, to undo the night. But then he leaned forward, his tone shifting. "Eleanor, I need to be honest. This isn't only about the operation. Your ex-husband, Nathan Harris, he's tied to the network we're investigating. He's not just unfaithful. He's involved in corporate raids, fraud, deals that ruin families. I need someone who can get close to him, someone he trusts enough to slip." The air left my lungs. Nathan, even after destroying me, even after stealing my home, his shadow still loomed over my life. Michael's voice was gentler now. "I won't force you, but I believe you're the key to exposing him, to stopping him before he ruins more lives." I sat in silence, torn between fury and disbelief. Part of me wanted to run from all of it, Michael, the marriage, the lies. But another part, the part still raw from Nathan's betrayal, felt something else. The chance to face him, to finally see justice. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "I'll help you. If Nathan is as guilty as you say, then I want the truth to come out. I want him to answer for what he's done." Michael nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then we begin." The resort in the Florida Keys looked like paradise at first glance. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, the ocean stretched endlessly in shades of blue, and the scent of salt and hibiscus lingered in the air. But beneath the postcard beauty, tension hung heavy. This wasn't a vacation. It was a battleground dressed in tropical colors. I was there as a translator, officially hired to assist the owners of the resort, an old family determined to protect their legacy. Michael, under his official cover, was acting as a facilitator, quietly keeping watch over every move. And then there was the other side, the buyers, the predators circling with sharp smiles and polished shoes. When the double doors of the conference hall opened and the group entered, my heart stopped. Nathan Harris walked in, Rebecca more on his arm. He looked older somehow, harder, but still carried himself with the same confidence that had once made me believe in him. Rebecca clung to him like a trophy, her dress bold, her laughter sharp enough to draw eyes across the room. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then his gaze swept the hall, landed on me, and froze. He stared as if he'd seen a ghost. I felt the weight of his eyes, searching, disbelieving. I had changed since he last saw me. My hair styled differently, my posture straighter, my clothes sharper, chosen to project the confidence I had been forced to build. I wasn't the broken woman he had thrown out. I was someone new, someone who had survived. I lowered my eyes briefly, then looked back at him with the calm detachment of a professional. Inside, my heart pounded, but on the surface, I was composed. I introduced myself to the room in flawless Spanish, guiding the opening exchanges between the resort owners and their potential buyers. My voice was steady, my smile practiced. Nathan never took his eyes off me, As the meeting broke for a short recess, I felt him approach. His footsteps were heavier than I remembered, his presence larger. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Please, I need to talk to you." I turned to face him, expression unreadable. For a moment, I saw the flicker of the man I had once loved, the man who had held me on the shores of Miami. But then Rebecca's laughter rang out from across the hall, pulling me back into the present. "What could you possibly have to say?" I asked coolly. "Not here," he pleaded. "Please, just give me a few minutes alone." His eyes were desperate, restless, like a man on the edge of unraveling. I hesitated, long enough for him to feel the weight of my silence. Then, with a measured nod, I said, "Fine. After the session ends. 5 minutes, nothing more." His relief was palpable. He exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath for a year. I turned away before he could say anything else, walking back toward the owner's table with deliberate calm. Inside, I was trembling, not with fear but with anticipation. This was the moment Michael had prepared me for. The past and the present were colliding, and I was no longer powerless. For the first time, Nathan needed something from me, and I intended to use it. The pier stretched quietly into the night, the wooden boards slick with salt and moonlight. I stood waiting, arms folded, the breeze carrying the scent of the ocean. My heart was steady, though I knew Michael and his team were somewhere nearby, watching, listening. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the moment everything would shift. Nathan arrived late, his footsteps uneven, his shoulders hunched as though the weight of his choices was finally pressing down on him. When he saw me standing there, he broke. He stumbled forward, then sank to his knees right there on the damp planks. "Eleanor," he choked, his voice ragged. "I was a fool. I lost the only thing that ever mattered. Please forgive me. Let me make it right. Come back to me." Tears glistened in his eyes, his hands reaching out as though he could anchor himself to me. For a moment, I let silence hang between us. I wanted him to feel it, the chasm he had dug himself into. When I finally spoke, my voice was cool, measured. "You hurt me more than anyone ever could. Words won't change that. If you want me to believe you, if you want me to even consider forgiving you, prove it. Tell me everything. Show me that you're not still hiding in lies." Desperation twisted his face. "Anything," he whispered. "I'll tell you anything." I pulled my phone from my pocket, setting it casually on the railing as though I had forgotten it there. The recording app ran silently, its tiny red light hidden by my hand. I looked back at him, my expression softening just enough to convince him. And then he began to talk. At first, it came in fragments, names of companies, shadowy partners, vague allusions to deals. But soon the floodgates opened. He poured it all out, the raider schemes, the fraud, the manipulation of weak businesses until they collapsed so his associates could buy them for scraps. He named investors, shell corporations, even hinted at the money funneled offshore. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. It was as if unburdening himself might somehow redeem him in my eyes. I nodded occasionally, murmured encouragements, pretending to be moved by his confession. Inside, my stomach churned at every word, but I forced myself to stay calm, to let him keep talking. Behind us, hidden in the shadows, Michael and his team were listening through a wire. Every name, every detail, every slip of Nathan's tongue was another nail in his coffin. When at last he finished, his face streaked with tears, he reached for my hand. "Now you know," he said, trembling. "Now you can believe I've changed. We can start over. Just say the word." I withdrew my hand slowly. "Thank you for telling me, Nathan. But you've mistaken me. I didn't come here to start over. I came here to end it." His face crumpled in confusion, but before he could respond, Michael stepped from the shadows, agents close behind. Nathan's eyes went wide as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He shouted, struggled, swore it was all a mistake. But then his gaze found me again and the horror dawned. "It was you," he spat. "You did this to me." I held his stare, unflinching. No, Nathan, you did it to yourself. This wasn't revenge for me. It was the truth. And standing there, watching him being taken away, I finally felt free. A few days later, the news spread quickly. Nathan Harris had died of a sudden heart attack in jail, his body giving out before the trial could begin. Though the court never saw his confession, the evidence was already submitted to prosecutors. His name would forever be tied to the financial destruction he caused. In the end, he couldn't escape the consequences, not even in death. Rebecca Moore vanished from the picture almost instantly, leaving him to rot in memory as she sought out her next conquest. I should have felt triumph, and in some ways I did. Justice had been served, his lies unraveled, his power broken. But there was no real joy in it, only a hollow satisfaction, sharp and cold. The man who had once been my entire world was gone, destroyed by his own hand. Standing on that same pier days later, I let the wind wash over me, the salt stinging my lips. It was over. The chapter of Nathan Harris had ended. And for the first time, I began to wonder what my life could look like without his shadow looming over it. After Nathan's arrest and sudden death, everything felt strangely quiet. The storm that had consumed my life for years was over, leaving behind a silence I didn't quite know how to fill. I went back to teaching, to simple routines, but the emptiness lingered. That was when Michael appeared at my door with a suitcase in hand and an invitation I never expected. "They've given me extended leave," he said. "Come with me to Turkey. Meet my family. See where I come from." For a moment, I hesitated. Travel had always been a dream I had woven with Nathan, one that had turned to ash in my hands. But Michael's eyes held no deceit, no hidden agenda, only patience and a hope I was slowly learning to trust. So I said yes. The journey felt like stepping into another world. The turquoise waters of the Aegean stretched endlessly, sunlight glittering on the waves. We wandered through bustling markets, the air thick with the scent of spices and roasted coffee. In quiet villages, women welcomed us with smiles and fresh bread, their warmth so genuine it brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for betrayal to fall. I felt safe. I felt alive. Meeting Michael's family was like being folded into a new chapter one hadn't dared to imagine. His mother embraced me without hesitation. His cousins teased him in rapid Turkish, pulling me into their laughter. In their home, filled with voices and stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long, belonging. One evening, we walked along the shore as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The water lapped gently at our feet, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Michael stopped, turned to me, and for the first time since that strange night at the masquerade, his voice trembled. "Eleanor," he said, "what began as a cover, it became something real. I love you, not as part of an operation, not because of what you could do for me, but because of who you are. I don't want to hide behind papers or accidents anymore. I want this to be real. Will you marry me, for real this time?" For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. All the memories rushed through me. Pain, betrayal, survival. And yet, standing there with Michael, I understood. Love isn't about fate sweeping you off your feet on a beach. It's about someone choosing you, every single day, with honesty and devotion. I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "This time, yes." Michael's relief was radiant as he pulled me into his arms. Behind us, the horizon stretched wide and endless, the sea reflecting the promise of tomorrow. And in that moment, I knew. I had closed the door on my past and stepped fully into the life I was meant to live. A life where love was not a lie but a gift. A new chapter had begun, and for the first time in a long while, it was filled with hope. I never imagined I'd be starting over at 65 with nothing but an old suitcase and a secondhand coat that didn't quite keep out the cold. Life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it, stripping you of the things you thought were solid. your career, your home, even the love of your own child. I used to think I was needed, respected even. After all, I had spent over 4 decades in the classroom, shaping young minds, wiping away tears, staying late to rewrite lesson plans, and showing up early to fix the coffee machine no one else would touch. I wasn't just a teacher. I was the woman who remembered birthdays, who kept spare pencils in her drawer, who still mailed handwritten thank you cards. My name was Margaret Hayes, and for 43 years, room 12B was my whole world. That world ended on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the clouds feel too low and everything smells like wet pavement and regret. I remember standing in front of the principal's office, my hands still damp from the hallway, thinking I was being called in about the new reading program. But when I walked in and saw Mr. Calhoun, not just the principal, but the district supervisor beside him, I knew. They didn't even sit me down, just handed me an envelope and said the district was moving in a new direction. The words felt like static. My heart thudded in my chest, and all I could think was, I'm not ready. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have savings. I wasn't supposed to be done yet. They called it a soft retirement. Said I should be proud that I'd earned a rest. But rest doesn't pay rent, and pride doesn't fill a fridge. I left the school with my nameplate, a small box of books, and a grief I couldn't quite explain. I wasn't just losing a job. I was losing my rhythm, my purpose, my place in the world. Still, I told myself not to panic. I had Brian, my only son. He and his wife, Lori, had a nice house on the edge of town, 2 kids, a golden retriever, the whole catalog picture life. Surely they wouldn't let me struggle alone. After everything I'd done, raising Brian alone after his father left, working 2 jobs to get him through college, helping with the down payment on that very house, I believed deep in my bones that he'd be there for me now. But belief, I would soon learn, can be a dangerous thing. Brian opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lori stood behind him, arms crossed, eyebrows already pinched with concern, or maybe annoyance. The kids were upstairs, their laughter faint through the ceiling. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh baked bread, and for a second I let myself believe I was home. But the warmth faded quickly. I sat at their kitchen island, clutching my purse like it might anchor me. Brian poured coffee the same way I used to for him during finals week, and asked, So, what's going on, Mom? I told him everything. How the district had let me go, how I'd gotten a small severance, but nothing that would last, how I just needed a little time to figure out what came next. I didn't ask for much. Just a couch, maybe a spare room. A few weeks. A place to breathe. Lori didn't say much at first. Just stirred her tea with a slow, repetitive clink. Brian leaned back, exhaling like I dropped a burden into his lap. It's not that we don't want to help, he began, and already my stomach turned. It's just the house is kind of tight right now. The kids have their own rooms. Lori's working remotely, and I need the garage for my studio setup. There's not really a space that makes sense. I smiled politely. The couch is fine. I won't be in the way. Lori looked up, finally. It's not just space, Margaret. It's the kids. They've got their routines, their homework zones. And we haven't really child-proofed things for, someone older. Child-proofed for someone older. The words hit harder than they should have, like I was a hazard, a walking disruption. I looked at Brian, hoping for even a flicker of warmth. Instead, I got silence. I could help, I offered. Around the house. With groceries, laundry. I won't be a burden. Brian ran a hand through his hair. Didn't you save anything for retirement? I wanted to lie. Wanted to say yes, that I'd planned ahead. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. I'd put everything into him, his college tuition, their first mortgage, even that emergency fund when Lori lost her job a few years back. I had chosen him over and over again, and now there was nothing left. I thought I had more time, I said quietly. Lori stood. Maybe a senior community would be better. Some of them are affordable and they're suited to your needs. My throat closed. I didn't have the money for that. I barely had enough for groceries. Brian looked away. Mom, I just don't know what else we can do right now. That was it. No warmth, no promise to revisit the idea, no hug at the door. Just 2 polite smiles and 1,000 unspoken ways of saying, we don't want you here. They let me stay one night. A mercy. I slept in the guest room, still painted with pastel clouds from when the kids were babies. In the morning, Lori handed me a bag of muffins and a folded blanket, in case it gets cold. Brian walked me to the curb, where my car sat like a reminder of everything I didn't have. He didn't say much. Just, let me know when you get settled, okay? Settled where? I drove away with no destination, no plan, and the quiet ache of realizing that love, real love, should never come with conditions. The RV had been sitting in storage for years, tucked behind my friend Sandra's old barn. It was a 1991 Winnebago with peeling paint and a leak in the skylight. I bought it back when I still believed in road trips and second chances. It smelled like dust, rust, and forgotten plans. But it was mine. I parked it in a lot near the highway, where no one asked questions as long as you paid in cash. At night, I curled up on the built-in bench with my coat pulled tight, listening to the low hum of 18-wheelers groaning past. The thin insulation didn't hold back the cold. My breath fogged the windows. Sometimes I left the radio on just to pretend I wasn't alone. Each morning, I'd wipe the condensation off the windshield and drive aimlessly through town, searching for jobs. I printed out my resume at the library, typed out in Times New Roman, like that would make me look more capable, and walked it into every business with a help wanted sign in the window. A grocery store manager looked me up and down before saying, "We're looking for someone a bit more active. Stocking shelves takes muscle, ma'am." At a motel front desk, the young woman barely glanced at my application before asking if I even knew how to use their booking software. I even offered to clean rooms. She smiled politely and said, "We already have someone, but thank you." The worst was the gas station on 5th and Clover. The owner looked sympathetic, then said, "People don't like being reminded of their mothers when they buy cigarettes." He chuckled like it was a joke. My knees ached after a few hours of walking. I stopped counting how many times I was told, "We'll keep your resume on file." Some didn't even bother lying. I ate peanut butter on crackers most days. The little money I had left went to gas and a gym membership, not to work out, but to shower. I started avoiding mirrors. My skin looked thin, my eyes older than I remembered. I tried calling Brian once. Just once. It went to voicemail. "Hey," I said softly. "Just wanted to hear your voice. I'm okay, just wanted to check in." I hung up before I could say I miss you, before I could beg. He never called back. Lori sent a text a few days later. "Hope you're doing all right. The kids say hi." I stared at the message for a long time. The kids don't have phones. Lori must have typed it herself. I didn't respond. One night, the rain came hard. It slipped through the cracked skylight and soaked the blanket I'd been sleeping under. I sat up, shivering, water dripping down my neck. The mattress was damp. The roof creaked. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass and whispered, "Is this it? Is this where I end?" I had no one left to call. No safety net. Just the hum of the highway and the loneliness of a life that had moved on without me. And just when I thought it couldn't get any darker, my phone rang. It was just past midnight when my phone buzzed on the tiny ledge beside the sink. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, area code I hadn't seen in years. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was tired, soaked to the skin, and the last thing I needed was another spam caller asking about my car warranty. But something in me, a flicker I hadn't felt in weeks, urged me to pick up. "Hello." My voice cracked from disuse. There was a pause, then a voice, smooth and steady. "Is this Margaret Hayes?" I hesitated. "Yes. Who's calling?" My name is Ethan Miller. I'm sorry to call so late. I hope I didn't wake you. Ethan Miller. The name didn't land at first. Then something clicked. A pair of two big glasses. A boy in the back row who never raised his hand but always turned in perfect essays. I hadn't said his name aloud in over 30 years. Ethan, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan from Ridgeway Elementary. He laughed softly. Yeah, that Ethan. I've been looking for you. I sat down on the damp bench, stunned. Why? Another pause. Then, because I owe you more than you'll ever know. He told me everything. How he'd been the kid no one believed in. The one teachers gave up on because he didn't talk much, didn't play sports, didn't fit the mold. But I had seen something in him. I had given him a journal. I remembered now, the blue one with a silver clasp. I'd written inside the cover, "Your words matter. Keep writing." He did. Ethan Miller was now the CEO of a successful publishing company in Seattle. He had a wife, 2 children, and a foundation that funded literacy programs for underprivileged youth. He said he'd been trying to track me down for months. My name had popped up in an alumni article about retirees, but then nothing. No address, no public profile, no trace. Until today, he said. I ran into Mr. Daniels. He taught music after you left. He mentioned something about you living in an RV. I'm sorry if this is intrusive, but I could not call. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not shame, hope. I don't know what to say, I murmured. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just let me help. I didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched, thick and uncertain. I'm not calling out of pity, he added. I'm calling because you changed my life, and I'd like to return the favor if you'll let me. No one had said anything like that to me in a long, long time. I looked around at the dim RV, the stained ceiling, the soaked blanket. I thought of Brian's face when he told me there was no room for me. And then I thought of Ethan, a boy I barely remembered, reaching across time to lift me up when I had nothing left. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I'll think about it, I whispered. But thank you, Ethan. Truly. Any time, he said. And Margaret, you were never forgotten. The apartment wasn't flashy. It wasn't perched on a hill or nestled in a luxury high-rise. But it had sunlight, real, warm sunlight that poured through the tall windows every morning and danced across the hardwood floors. The kitchen was small but new, with a little breakfast nook that looked out over the water. The bedroom held a queen-size bed with sheets so soft I cried the first night I laid on them. Ethan had arranged everything. Quietly, respectfully. No fanfare. He wired enough money to cover the deposit and a year of rent. Insisted on helping furnish it. Just the basics, he said. But even the basics felt like a palace after weeks in the cold. I bought groceries for the first time in a month. Real food. Fresh eggs. A bag of oranges. Whole milk in a glass bottle. I made a pot of stew, the kind I used to cook on snow days when Brian was little, and the smell wrapped around me like a blanket. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took slow walks along the pier, watching the fishermen prep their boats and the seagulls argue overhead. I went to the library and checked out books I hadn't read in years. I even joined a small book club at the community center. They welcomed me like I'd always belonged, and I started writing, just a little at first. Memories, letters I never sent, short reflections on the classroom, on motherhood, on the strange shape of silence after you've been cast aside. Ethan had offered me a part-time consulting role with his foundation. Nothing demanding, just reviewing children's manuscripts, giving feedback, helping train new mentors. I accepted. For the first time in a long time, I felt useful again. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my new bathroom. My hair was brushed and softly curled. I wore a deep green cardigan, my favorite brooch pinned at the collar. I looked alive, I looked like myself, not the woman who had been turned away at her son's door, not the figure hunched in the corner of an RV, shivering under a wet blanket, but Margaret Hayes, teacher, survivor, woman reborn. I poured a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor. There were still bills to think about, still scars that hadn't quite faded. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Then, just as I was beginning to feel truly settled, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Brian. I stared at it. The steam from my tea curled in the air between us like a ghost. He called again, and again. By the fourth ring, I picked up. Mom. Brian's voice was hesitant, thin, like a thread stretched too tight. I leaned back in my chair, one hand wrapped around the warm mug of tea, the other resting on my lap. Hi, Brian. My voice was calm, steady, almost foreign to myself. I've been trying to reach you, he said quickly. I was worried. Were you? I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I let the silence do the work. I heard you moved, he continued. Lori's sister mentioned it. Something about a place near the marina. Ah, so that's how the rumor started. A neighbor, a casual comment, a little too much curiosity. I wondered how long it took before someone mentioned that I'd gotten back on my feet, and how fast that news traveled to their dinner table. I just wanted to see how you were, he added, softer this time. It's been a rough few weeks for us. There it was, the opening act. I'm well, I said simply. Pause. Then, would you like to meet for lunch? Just the two of us. I feel like we need to talk. A month ago, I would have said yes before he finished the sentence. But today, I didn't answer right away. I let the weight of his silence press into the line between us. Finally, I said, all right. We met at a bistro downtown, the kind Lori used to complain was too expensive. Brian chose it, probably thought it would impress me. I arrived early, sat by the window, watching people pass by, clutching their coats against the wind. When Brian walked in, he looked surprised, like he hadn't expected me to look different. My hair was done. My clothes were neat, tailored. I carried myself like someone who didn't need anything. Mom, he said, blinking. You look great. I feel great. We ordered. Small talk followed. Stiff. Empty. He asked about my apartment. I told him about the book club. He nodded in all the right places, smiled at all the right times. But there was something behind his eyes. Tension. A calculation. Finally, he set his fork down and sighed. Things have been tough lately. Really tough. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry to hear that. The mortgage is piling up, he said. Lori's hours got cut, and the kids, well, you know how expensive school is now. I sipped my water. We were thinking, he continued, forcing a chuckle, since things are going well for you now, maybe you could, I don't know, help us out a bit? Just until we catch up. For the kids. There it was, the real reason for lunch. I set my glass down gently. When I asked to stay with you, just until I figured things out, do you remember what you said? His face reddened slightly. Mom, come on. That was different. We didn't know. No, I interrupted, soft but firm. You did know. You knew I had nowhere to go. And you made your choice. He looked down at his plate. I was overwhelmed. We didn't expect you to lose everything. I finished for him. Neither did I. He looked up, eyes wide. So that's it? You won't help us? I smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was the kind of smile that comes after surviving a storm. Lunch is on me, Brian. Consider it my only contribution. He stared at me, stunned. You can't be serious. You have money now. You're living in a beautiful place. And we're your family. Family. That word. So easy to say when there's something to gain. You're right, I said quietly. And when I needed mine, I was sleeping in a leaking RV. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I stood, adjusted my coat, and looked at him one last time. Take care of your kids, Brian. But this time, you'll have to do it without me. Then I walked away. No drama, no tears, no turning back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. The sun spilled across my windows that morning like warm honey. Outside, the ocean moved slow and steady, breathing in and out like it had all the time in the world. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting through the air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was late for something. I didn't feel like I was behind or chasing or proving. I was just living. I spent the next few days doing things that had no urgency, no purpose beyond joy. I planted rosemary in a clay pot for the balcony. I bought a second-hand bicycle with a wicker basket and rode it down the path by the dunes. I read poetry out loud in my living room, just for the sound of it. Brian didn't call again. Neither did Lori. And strangely, that didn't hurt anymore. The wound was still there, of course. It always would be. But it had scarred over, tough and quiet. I had grieved what needed to be grieved. And now I was building something new in its place. Ethan visited once, with his wife and 2 kids. We sat out on the patio with lemonade and laughed about the old days. He told me they were naming their new scholarship after me, the Hayes Fund. I didn't cry in front of them. But when they left, I held the note he'd written in my hand for a long time. You gave me my voice when I didn't have one. Now it's your turn to be heard. That night, I opened my laptop again. The cursor blinked on the screen like a pulse. I didn't know what I was writing yet. Maybe a memoir. Maybe just a letter to the woman I used to be. But I knew this much. I would never beg for love again. I would never shrink to make someone else comfortable. And I would never forget what it felt like to stand in the rain with nowhere to go. Because that memory, that ache, was what would keep me grounded. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting go for yourself. I stood by the window, watching the last light of the day dip beneath the horizon. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but full. Full of possibility, full of peace, full of me.